Welcome back to the Journeyman Podcast, everyone. We're on episode 45, and today we're diving into a conversation that's got, well, it seems like everyone talking about it, Elon Musk with Joe Rogan. If you're enjoying these deep dives, by the way, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the podcast. This conversation is a whirlwind covering AI, government spending, even space travel, the whole nine yards. And to help us unpack it all, we've got our expert here.
Always happy to dive into these fascinating conversations.
This one is definitely fascinating. Lots of controversial ideas, I'd say, but some potential solutions, too, that I think are worth exploring. You know what really caught my attention right off the bat was Musk's claim about the U.S. government. He says they're losing trillions of dollars annually and can't even pass their own audits.
Trillions, that's just, it's hard to even fathom that kind of money.
Mind-boggling.
To really drive home this point, he shares an anecdote about the Navy. They supposedly received $12 billion to acquire submarines, but get this, no submarines ever materialized.
Wait, so $12 billion, poof, gone, and no submarines.
And when asked about it, where the money went, the answer was essentially, we don't know.
Something's not adding up here.
It really highlights a lack of accountability.
So $12 billion vanishes and nobody knows where it went.
It gets worse. Musk goes on to explain that the Treasury's payment system doesn't even require basic information like categorization codes or descriptions for payments.
So they're essentially writing blank checks with our tax dollars.
That's one way to put it. He actually calls them untraceable blank checks.
Untraceable, wow. That's pretty alarming. So what's the solution? Musk doesn't just leave us hanging with his bombshell, does he?
Thankfully, no, he does have a proposition. He calls it Doge, D-O-G-E.
Doge, like the meme.
Yeah, it stands for Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay, I see.
Essentially, it would recommend spending cuts to different government departments, and then, critically, this information would be transparently available to the public. He envisions a website, doge.gov, where anyone can see exactly where the money's going and what cuts are being proposed.
So kind of like a public watchdog for government spending. That's actually a pretty cool idea. But wasn't that be met with a lot of resistance from within the system itself?
Musk actually compares himself to a captain of a ship with a hostile crew.
Wow, that's a pretty vivid analogy.
So yeah, he acknowledges there would be pushback.
And speaking of resistance, Musk and Rogan also spend quite a bit of time discussing media bias. They seem to be particularly critical of what they call the legacy media.
Right. They accuse these outlets of coordinating talking points, essentially pushing specific political agendas rather than objectively reporting the facts.
So instead of reporting the news, they're creating it? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah. To illustrate this point, they point to the media's coverage of Doge. They claim that media outlets are focusing on negative aspects of the initiative, but ignoring the potential benefits like, uncovering instances of fraud and waste.
So they're basically saying there's a deliberate effort to control the narrative surrounding Doge and maybe other issues as well.
It ties into a broader concern about, the difficulty of discerning truth in the current information landscape.
With so much information coming at us from all directions, how do we know what to believe anymore? It can feel like everyone has an agenda.
Exactly. And it can be really hard to separate fact from fiction.
So what's the antidote to this? They must have some ideas.
Well, Musk sees his acquisition of Twitter, now X, as part of the solution.
Yes, X, the artist formerly known as Twitter.
He believes that platforms like this can be used to circumvent traditional media channels, provide a more open and diverse space for information to circulate.
So a more decentralized information ecosystem. Interesting, but how do you ensure accuracy? Wouldn't that just lead to even more misinformation and chaos?
They don't fully address that, but they seem to believe the benefits outweigh the risks. And it's here that Musk introduces a potential solution, his new AI, Grok.
Grok, okay, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. Tell me more about this AI.
Grok is described as maximally truth-seeking, which is a pretty bold claim these days.
Maximally truth-seeking, okay. I'm listening.
One of its key features is an unhinged mode.
Unhinged, huh?
It means it can deliver information with a touch of humor and irreverence.
I kind of like the sound of that. Give me an example.
Sure. When asked about the current state of news, Grok, in its unhinged mode, called it a total dumpster fire.
Okay, that's pretty fun. And maybe not that far off from the truth. But I thought Musk was wary of other AI models out there like OpenAI and Google Gemini.
He expresses concerns about potential biases in those models. He's worried they could be programmed with specific agendas that might not align with his vision of a truly truth-seeking AI.
So it's like he sees Grok as a countermeasure to the potential dangers of these other AIs.
You could do that,
But
yes.
how does this tie back into the issue of media bias?
Well, if Grok can actually live up to its promise, it could act as a powerful tool for fact-checking and debunking misinformation. It could help people cut through all the noise and spin and get to the heart of what's actually true.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
Right.
But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about another one of Musk's, well, passions, space exploration. SpaceX and the dream of making life multiplanetary, those are recurring themes in this conversation.
Absolutely. It's a vision that's deeply intertwined with his whole philosophy.
Okay, but what are the biggest challenges? What's standing in the way of this becoming a reality?
Well, one of the key challenges is the development of fully and rapidly reusable rockets, like Starship, which is what SpaceX is working on right now.
Starship, yeah, I've heard of that.
Musk believes that reusability is the key to making space travel more affordable, more accessible.
I mean, that makes sense, right? If you can reuse the rocket, it brings down the cost.
Exactly. He claims it could reduce the cost of space travel by, get this, a factor of 100 or even 10,000,
100 to 10,000.
which means space travel could become as affordable as, like a plane ticket.
Wow, that's incredible. But there have to be some pretty big technological hurdles to overcome, right?
There are, for sure. One of the biggest challenges is designing a reusable heat shield that can withstand the extreme temperatures of re-entry from orbit.
Reusable heat shield, wow. It seems like Musk is drawn to these impossible tasks.
You're right, he seems to thrive on these grand challenges, these things that push the boundaries of what we think is possible.
Well, he's certainly got a lot on his plate, from tackling government waste to developing truth-seeking AI to making humanity multiplanetary. It's almost like he's living in the future, while the rest of us are still stuck in the present.
It's definitely a lot to take in, but I think it's important to remember that Musk is not just a dreamer, he's a doer. He's not just talking about these ideas, he's actively working to make them a reality.
Right, he's putting his money where his mouth is. Well, on that note, I think we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into some of the more controversial topics that Musk and Rogan discuss, including the Epstein client list and alleged government cover-ups. Don't go anywhere.
So before the break, we were talking about Musk's his plans for SpaceX and his idea of making humanity, a multiplanetary species.
It's a fascinating vision, but as we were saying, there are a lot of challenges along the way. And they also get into some pretty controversial areas, don't they? Like the Epstein client list and alleged government cover-ups.
Yeah, they do touch on these things, but mostly just express frustration, I think, with the lack of transparency.
It's a sentiment I think a lot of people share, this feeling that those in power are operating in secrecy and maybe not always acting in everyone's best interest.
Definitely taps into that broader sense of, disillusionment and distrust that a lot of people feel toward governments, toward large institutions.
So taking a step back for a minute, what would you say is the overarching theme that emerges from this whole conversation? Because it's a real roller coaster of topics. We've got government waste, we've got media bias, AI, space travel. Is there a thread that connects it all?
I think at the heart of it, this conversation is about power, who holds it, how it's used, and who benefits from it.
That's a really interesting observation. So whether it's government spending or the media or even the development of AI, it all comes back to these questions of power and control.
Exactly. And, Musk seems to be positioning himself as someone who's challenging the existing power structures, whether it's through his work with SpaceX, his development of Grok, or, his acquisition of X, formerly Twitter.
It's really interesting how he approaches these issues from so many different angles. He's not just, a tech visionary. He's also an entrepreneur, an engineer, and increasingly, I think, a social commentator.
He's a complex guy, that's for sure. And I think this conversation really reveals that complexity. He's not afraid to tackle difficult issues, to challenge the status quo, and to put forward, these bold ideas, even if they're controversial.
And it's that boldness, I think, that makes this conversation so engaging. He's not just talking about the future. He's actually trying to shape it.
And I think in a way, he's inviting us to participate in that process, to really question our assumptions, think critically about the information we're consuming, and to consider the long-term implications of the choices that we make today.
Speaking of choices, one thing that struck me was this emphasis on personal responsibility.
Yeah, he is definitely critical of these these big institutions and systems, but he also places a lot of emphasis on individual agency. He believes we all have a role to play in shaping the future, and that we shouldn't just passively accept the status quo.
So he's not just a critic, he's also offering solutions both at the systemic level and at the individual level. He seems to believe that change is possible, but it requires both, top-down and bottom-up approaches.
Absolutely. And like we said, he's putting his money where his mouth is, investing in these companies and technologies that he believes will actually drive that change.
Well, he's certainly given us a lot to think about. And I imagine our listeners are buzzing with their own thoughts and reactions.
Oh, I'm sure they are. There's so much to unpack here, so many different angles to explore.
So if you're listening out there, we want to know, what are your takeaways from this deep dive? What resonates with you? What are you still grappling with? Let us know in the comments.
And hey, while you're at it, hit that like button and subscribe to the Journeyman podcast so you don't miss out on future deep dives.
And don't forget to check out the original source material on the Powerful JRE YouTube channel. The link's in the description. We highly recommend subscribing to their channel for more fascinating content.
So to wrap things up, this conversation between Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, it's really a wild ride through all these challenging ideas and potential solutions.
It's a glimpse into the mind of a visionary, someone who's not afraid to disrupt the status quo and challenge us to reimagine what the future could be.
And whether you agree with him or not, you can't deny that Elon Musk is a force to be reckoned with. And this conversation provides, I think some really valuable insights into his thinking and his motivations.
And for us as listeners, I think it's a call to action, to really engage with these complex issues, to think critically, and to participate in shaping the world that we want to live in.
Absolutely.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on the Journeyman podcast. Until next time, keep those minds open and those conversations flowing. We're back with the Journeyman podcast, wrapping up our deep dive into Elon Musk's conversation with Joe Rogan.
It's been a long one, that's for sure.
It really has a real roller coaster of topics, everything from government waste and media bias to AI and the future of space travel.
I think a lot of people see Musk as this kind of, larger-than-life figure.
Definitely.
But I think what comes through in this conversation is his genuine passion for these ideas, his drive to actually solve these complex problems.
Yeah, he's not afraid to think big and to challenge conventional thinking. One thing that really stood out to me was how he connects all these seemingly disparate issues.
Like it's all part of one big puzzle.
Right, exactly. Like his concerns about media bias and the need for a truth-seeking AI like Grok.
Right. He sees Grok as this potential countermeasure to the spread of misinformation.
To the manipulation of information by these powerful institutions.
Mm.
It's almost like he's building like a toolkit for the future, with each tool designed to address a specific challenge.
But also contributing to this larger vision.
And that vision, as we've been talking about, is one where humanity becomes this multiplanetary species, pushing the boundaries of technology, of innovation, to ensure our long-term survival.
It's a bold vision, no doubt about it.
And it raises a lot of questions, right? I mean, is it even possible? Is it ethical? What are the potential consequences? Things like that.
And those are questions that Musk himself acknowledges. I mean, he's not claiming to have all the answers, but I think what he's trying to do is encourage us to engage with these questions.
To think critically, to consider, all the possibilities, all the potential outcomes. And I think that's what makes this conversation so valuable. It's not just about listening to Musk's ideas. It's about, it's about engaging with them, challenging them, and ultimately forming our own opinions.
Exactly. And that's why we do these deep dives.
To spark these conversations, to get people thinking, debating, really wrestling with these complex issues. The idea of a maximally truth-seeking AI like Grok, I don't know, it's fascinating, but also a little unsettling to me.
It is. It raises some really big questions about the nature of truth, about the role of technology in shaping how we understand the world.
And the potential for, for both good and for harm. I think that's really important to keep in mind. As we develop these increasingly powerful technologies, we have to be mindful of their impact.
Not just the positive, but also the potential negative consequences.
We can't just blindly embrace technology without without really thinking it through.
And that's where, open dialogue and critical thinking becomes so important. We need to have these conversations, engage with different perspectives, and make informed decisions about the kind of future that we want to create.
So to our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your questions, your insights in the comments. What are your hopes for the future? What are your fears? What role do you see technology playing in all of this?
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Journeyman podcast. We'll be back with more explorations of these fascinating conversations.
And be sure to check out the original source material, the full conversation between Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, on the powerful JRE YouTube channel. The link is in the description. Subscribing to their channel is a great way to stay informed, to stay engaged with these ideas that are shaping our world.
Until next time, keep those minds open and those conversations flowing.
Thanks for joining us on the Journeyman Podcast.